Welcome to Focus Today. I'm your host, Perry Atkinson, and what a delight to have back with us today Ted Shoebat. He's the author of a book that's been very popular, For God or For Tyranny. He's been writing some pretty powerful articles as well. Now, there's a picture of the book on the screen. You may want to check it out at the bookstores, Amazon, Barnes & Noble. And I think you'll find it to be a pretty fascinating read. But today we want to talk to him about the Russian buildup, military buildup in Syria. Hey, Ted, good to see you. How you doing, my friend?
Doing well. It's good to be on. It's actually my birthday today. So.
Happy birthday. Yeah, let's see. You're 17 and a half.
No, I'm turning 25. I turned 25.
Oh, well, if I was there, I'd buy a birthday cake. Good to see you, buddy.
Well, this is a good enough birthday gift for me. So
oh, good.
Thank you, guys. Good to be on.
Good. Well, why are you tracking this? Why should we be concerned about this? What's happening?
Well, with Russia coming into Syria, here's the thing: is that a lot of people are making this as though Putin is the Hitler of our time, and that Syria is kind of like Czechoslovakia, and Hitler's invading it, or Syria is like Poland. They're making it out to be almost apocalyptic. And there's a lot of paranoia out there about Russia. Russia is Gog and Magog, Meshech in the Bible, that's Moscow. And there's absolutely no evidence in this. The Bible never says anything about Russia being the nation of the Antichrist, regardless of what Bible teachers have been saying for centuries, really, that Russia would be part of the Antichrist. I mean, going all the way back to the 1800s, you will find people saying these sorts of things. What's happening, the reason why it's important, I believe, because I think it is completely right that Russia invade Syria. I think it's completely right that Russia take over Crimea. They're the two most powerful nations on earth, Russia and the United States. Of course, America is going to make propaganda against Russia and make them out to be the bad guys. They're the evil, tyrannical nation. We're the good guys. When in reality, what's happening is America and Russia are fighting over influence of the Middle East. This is why, for example, America supported the coup in Egypt. But then there was another coup in Egypt, and Mohammed Morsi was thrown out. And who supported that coup? It was Putin. Putin is against the Islamization of the Middle East, while America is supporting the Islamization of the Middle East. America gives weapons to the rebels in Syria. Putin is for Bashar al-Assad being there. Why? Because Bashar al-Assad is a puppet for the Soviets. He's a Soviet-influenced leader. But the thing is though, is that it's also very strategic. The eternal enemy of Russia is not the U.S. The eternal enemy, and by eternal I mean ideological, spiritual, an enemy that Russia sees as a diabolical enemy. Turkey. For hundreds of years, the Ottomans, the Turks, and the Russians have been fighting, going all the way back. Oh man, to the battles between Prince Ivanovich and the Tatars and all that. Russia has been fighting the Muslims for centuries. And you look at the Russo-Ottoman wars. They were fighting for hundreds of years. Peter the Great fought against the Ottoman Empire and defeated the Ottoman Empire after lots and lots of fighting. And so if Russia does not invade Syria, this is what I say to Americans who are just absolutely paranoid about this. If Russia does not invade Syria, who will? Turkey. This is why I'm all in favor. Russia, for one, is a Christian nation. It has a state religion, which is the Russian Orthodox Church. And one of the reasons why also I'm in favor of Russia invading Syria is because Russia also has a religious aspiration behind this. Just like it had a religious aspiration to invade Crimea, the Ukraine, because the Ukraine is the first part of, it used to be a part of Russia. It wasn't always an independent nation. When it was a part of Russia, it was the first place where Christianity thrived. When Christianity first came into Russia, it came into Kiev. And then you had Saint Vladimir, who was the first Russian king to convert to Christianity. He was his kingdom, his palace, his headquarters was in Kiev. So the Russians see a very spiritual importance in Kiev, in Ukraine, and also in Syria. 2 years ago, there was a major leader in the Orthodox Church. His name was Metropolitan Hilarion. Metropolitan Hilarion had a meeting with delegates from the Vatican. This was back in 2013 to discuss the situation of the well-being of Christians in Syria and also on the obligation of the Russian government to protect the Christians. And then a little bit after, Russia began to send tanks into Syria. There was a journalist by the name of Theodore Karasik who wrote an article on the Al Arabiya. And he said that the Kremlin sees Syria as part of Russia's sphere of influence and is keen on maintaining its place on the world stage and in the Middle East. And then he says here, quote, in addition, the Russian Orthodox Church, which is closely tied to the Kremlin, sees involvement in Syria as necessary to protect Christians from the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria and other extremists. So there's a strategic region, but then there is a religious reason. And the Russian Orthodox Church sees the importance of Russian presence in Syria. They esteem this importance as a means to protecting their Christian brethren, because the majority of Christians in Syria are Eastern Orthodox, just like Russia. So I think it's very good. In fact, when the FSA and other terrorist groups like al-Nusra and ISIS were killing Christians in Syria not too long ago, you had Russian mercenaries in Syria, and they were protecting churches.
Okay, you know, this, not the first time I've heard this scenario, and it's fascinating to me. It really is fascinating to me because of the rich Christian history within Russia, and especially with the Orthodox Church. But there are some things that kind of put us on tilt. The relationship with Putin and Iran, how do you explain that one?
Well, the United States has, for one, the United States has relations with Islamic terrorist countries. So, for example, America will support the Sunni. The most powerful of the Sunni nations is Turkey. And Turkey influences pretty much the entire Sunni world because militarily it's the most powerful. Russia has to counterbalance that, so it will support the Shiite. And the Shiites, their most powerful nation is Iran. So it's simply counterbalancing it. Who would be worse? I'm more worried about Turkey having nuclear than I am Iran having nuclear. Because the Iranians, for one thing, are a lot more mellow than the Turks. I know that sounds very simplistic, but it's true. They're more mellow. When the Turks had a very powerful Ottoman Empire, they butchered millions of Christians in Syria and in Greece. And also, the Iranians, when they have a nuke, and they will have a nuke, they're not going to nuke Israel. They won't. The Iranians aren't that stupid. And if the Iranians were really that dangerous, Israel would have taken care of it by now, but they're not. The Iranians will nuke Saudi Arabia. The whole Iran deal between the Obama administration and Iran, it's really provoking a lot of people to a lot of consternation and fear. But even in the scriptures, it says that Elam will destroy Arabia. I don't remember which verse, but there's a verse in the scripture that says this. I think it's I believe it's in Daniel. But it talks about the Elamites destroying Arabia. I believe that Iran is going to nuke Saudi Arabia. If there's one country that Iran hates the most, it's not America, it's not Israel, it's Saudi Arabia.
All right, so does Iran have to have, we've been trying to figure out the strange potential coalition between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Does Saudi Arabia need Israel's protection to fight off Iran?
It would, yes, because the Iranians are a lot more advanced than Saudi Arabia. But America has actually been increasing the armament of Saudi Arabia because Saudi Arabia is terrified of Iran. But this is one question that I would like to ask people who are very worried about this Iran deal and they're terrified of Iran. If the Iran deal is so bad, right, because Iran is a Muslim nation and no Muslim nation should own a nuke, and I agree they shouldn't, why hasn't America done anything about Pakistan? Pakistan is a Sunni nation, and it owns around 100 nukes. 100 nukes belong to the state of Pakistan. How come everyone's not up in arms about that? They're not.
But Ted, isn't that more of an administrative philosophy? I mean, we got an administration that seems to be extremely sympathetic, and so if Pakistan has the nukes, they're probably perfectly happy with that. Now they want Iran to have nukes.
They are, and America has been actually giving lots and lots of money to the Pakistani government. But here's the thing: is we have to remember, God is in control, and God is going to protect Israel. Is it corruption that is behind the Iran deal? Yes. But at the same time, we have to look at reality and say, is Iran crazy enough to nuke Israel? No. Is Iran crazy enough to nuke the United States? No. It's not happening. These people, as crazy as the mullahs in Iran may sound, they're not going to do that because they know they would be obliterated. But can they nuke Saudi Arabia? Yes. When you look at the fact that America is making itself more and more independent oil-wise, and is severing itself from the clutches of Saudi Arabia's monopoly on oil, it's going to become more and more obvious that America is not going to really care about Saudi Arabia as much in the near future. So if Iran nukes Saudi Arabia, it's going to be at a time when America sees no interest in Saudi Arabia and no benefit in protecting Saudi Arabia. Let's not forget, America is a mechanical nation. It doesn't really do things out of moral obligation.
All right. Hey, I'm out of time. You're fascinating. Let me just say to our listeners and viewers, check out his book, For God or For Tyranny. You can pick it up at the bookstores there or Amazon. There's a picture of it there on the screen. You can go to Shoebat, SHOEBAT.com, and pick up some more of his writings and articles. I wish we had you for a couple segments. We'll get you back. Fascinating. Thank you, Ted. And by the way, happy birthday, buddy.
God bless you, sir.
God bless you. All right, we'll be right back.
It's good enough gift. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Welcome back. Earlier, Steve Johnson had an opportunity to interview Chris Papst. He's authored a very interesting book called Capital Murder. It's not what you think. Let's join Chris and Steve now.
Chris Papst is the author of a book called Capital Murder, an investigative reporter's hunt for answers in a collapsing city. And the city that he is focusing on is Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. And we go back to 2011. Chris, I want to ask you first, I mean, looking at the history, we have 1978, Cleveland became the first city in America to go bust since the Great Depression. And then about 54 cities and towns and counties also seeking protection from creditors since 1980. So let me ask you, you picked Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. It's probably off the radar of some people. Why did you pick that particular city?
Well, because of all the cities that you mentioned, and even since the beginning, the founding of our country, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania is the only capital city ever to file for bankruptcy. And the significance of that is that capital cities are supposed to be recession-proof. That is where all the tax dollars from the state are going. And every day, tens of thousands of government workers go into Harrisburg to park, to pay taxes, to buy food and groceries. There's an economic built-in infrastructure that capital cities have that are supposed to make them immune to this type of financial crisis. So I wrote Capital Murder to show people how badly the finances in Harrisburg were actually run and what led to that city's epic financial collapse, so other cities don't do the same thing.
Okay, now, it really wasn't that long ago, and I think we tend to think in the 1970s it seemed like there was a lot of economic downturn that caused a lot of major cities to have these problems. Looking at Harrisburg, I know that there's some allegations of corruption and all sorts of things, but when you're looking at this, especially being a capital city, as you mentioned, what were the mistakes you saw that could possibly be repeated, I suppose, by any other city in the future?
Oh, absolutely. Now, yeah, sure. It wasn't that long ago Harrisburg filed for bankruptcy. It was October of 2011, and I was an investigative reporter in that city working for the CBS affiliate. And the timeline there is what was most interesting to me. So you have this timeline of financial collapse. And if you read the book and you look at the book, you can see what this timeline was and how the city went from, okay, well, we're just kind of getting in a little bit too much debt here. We're taking on too much leveraging of our monies. We're building too many things that possibly we can't afford. And then it starts getting into, well, now we don't have the money to repair streetlights. Now we don't necessarily have the money to maintain our police force. Now we have to cut firefighters. Now we don't have the money to repair sinkholes. Now large blocks are being abandoned because we don't have the money to maintain the infrastructure and the utilities of that block. So it was this timeline that I could clearly see happening up until October of 2011. When the city filed for bankruptcy. So in Capital Murder, people can see where their municipality is in this timeline. And as I studied this more, and as I looked at more cities around America, I noticed that a lot of them are following the same exact path. They're doing a very similar thing. The consequences are very similar, and we can see these parallels. So in Capital Murder, you can see where your town is, what mistakes you're making compared to what mistakes Harrisburg made, and hopefully you can stop it before it gets to the point of that financial collapse. Because when that happened in Harrisburg, when it filed for bankruptcy, the people of that city suffered. The quality of life for the people living in Harrisburg drastically declined. Now, I did not live in Harrisburg. I worked there for 4 years. But going into it every day and watching the suffering of the people, from sports being cut at the high school and middle school to entire blocks having to be abandoned because the city couldn't fill sinkholes and repair the utilities. It was awful, and it didn't have to happen.
You know, the scenario you laid out, although it can affect other cities, you were talking about overreaching your credit, spending money you don't have, seeing the infrastructure going down. I mean, not only is this a problem for cities, but this sounds like what really the federal government is up against, as our $13 trillion plus in indebtedness continues too. So isn't this all? Let's standardize this, globalize it a little bit more. This is a national problem too from our federal government, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, this is not a problem with central Pennsylvania where Harrisburg is. This is not a problem with Pennsylvania. This is not a problem with the Northeast or the East Coast. This is a problem, as you said, nationally. We as Americans are being conditioned to just borrow. Just borrow money, leverage yourself. It's a lot easier to leverage yourself than it is to work hard and acquire the capital that you need to be prosperous. But that's not the message that we're getting. That's not the message that we're getting from our federal government. That's not the message that we're getting from our states. And it's trickling all the way down to our local municipalities and our cities. And it's dangerous. And if more cities do what Harrisburg did, it's the problem here is catastrophic. Harrisburg is a city of 49,000 people. It is a capital city of the 5th or 6th largest state in the country, population-wise. Pennsylvania is. But relatively, it's a small city. But when Harrisburg went bankrupt, it had an impact across the country because the municipal bond market is not very big. There's only so many banks and Wall Street bankers and consultants and attorneys that deal in the municipal bond market. So when you have one or two municipalities or cities that are going bankrupt, it disrupts the entire thing. Interest rates can be affected. Just the ability to get that money can be affected. Now, if we have more Harrisburgs, we have more cities that are affecting that municipal bond market, and interest rates are fluctuating as a result of that, and the money becomes more difficult to get. Now you can have a situation where the entire country is struggling just because a few cities fall. And you're absolutely correct. It is not a Harrisburg issue. It is an American issue, and we need to get a hold of this before it gets too far down the road, or we're going to be in a lot of trouble.
All right, I want to mention we're talking with Chris Papst. He's the author, he's a reporter and author of the book Capital Murder, an investigative reporter's hunt for answers in a collapsing city. You know, you brought up within the book how the media and citizens who didn't seem to care played a role in all of this. Elaborate a little bit on that. In this Harrisburg scenario, what did you see take place with those two entities?
Well, sure. You even mentioned going back to the 1970s that our cities were struggling, and Harrisburg was your typical Rust Belt town. In the 1970s, it lost 25% of its population, and that's 25% of the population that can afford to leave, taking their tax dollars with them. Well, in 1982, a new mayor came in. And he ended up being mayor for 28 years. And what this man did in the city looked remarkable. He took over a city in 1982 that was really struggling, and he started over leveraging. But in the process of over leveraging, he put that money back into the city. He reinvested it into the city, into bringing a minor league baseball team to town, building stadiums for the baseball team and the soccer team, building universities and museums and high rises, and new bars and restaurants were coming to town. The downtown was getting vibrant. The Whitaker Center for the Performing Arts. He was doing wonderful things in the city, and that's all that the people saw. That is all that the media wanted to see. They wanted to see this city thrive. And from 1982 to 2010, it did thrive under this mayor. But nobody wanted to see the amount of debt that he was actually racking up. And 1 year after he leaves office in 2011, 1 year after being mayor for 28 years, the city has this remarkable financial collapse because nobody wanted to see what was actually happening to the finances of the city. All they wanted to see was the new buildings, the baseball teams, and the new institutions that were coming to town. And the people just let him do whatever he wanted. I say in Capital Murder that he became a dictator, and he did. He had created the trust within the people, and they could see for themselves the progress that he was creating, and nobody wanted to get in the way of it.
Okay, now, I see a national scenario there. I see a lot of people who are saying, we need to keep a level of benefits, whatever that is, coming to us because we're the taxpayers, so we need to get money back from our government. Meanwhile, our indebtedness keeps rising. At some point, I know nationally, our indebtedness will be such that we can't even start paying the interest, let alone the principal on that, and we've heard that we're getting close to that. Juxtapose that, if you would, with Harrisburg. At what point did they realize that there was a problem that had to be dealt with and they were too far gone? Because it was apparently after this mayor had left office. What was the wake-up call there?
I think the wake-up call was that they couldn't pay their people anymore. The employees of the city could no longer get paid, and the city had to start making choices. We either pay our police officers or we no longer pay our debt. And the option was just those two. And the city chose to pay its employees. And then as they stopped paying their debt, and it started with one or two debts, again, this is the timeline that we're talking about, it started with one or two smaller debts they were no longer paying. Well, then the city gets sued by those creditors. And then they have to start issuing tax liens, and they have to start bringing in money 1 or 2 years before it was actually due to the city for the next payroll. And then they stopped paying more debtors. And then it got to the point where every single entity that had money tied up in Harrisburg in the form of debt, none of them were getting paid any longer. And the city was struggling just to be able to pay the employees, the dwindling number of employees that it had, because it had to cut employees, fire, police, and other employees in the city, just so they could keep up the basic services. And at that point, you said, there is no other solution here. We tried a bunch of different things. This city has to go bankrupt. It does not have any other feasible option to try to get this city back onto its feet. And that's what City Council did in October of 2011, making history.
Looking back at what led up to that point, was there no voice of alarm that was being sounded, or was there and no one paid attention?
Fantastic question. Why would there be a voice of alarm? You have this mayor of 28 years. In 2006, put this into perspective. In 2006, the World Mayor Organization, which is a group of people globally that put a ranking together of the greatest leaders in the world, they named Harrisburg's mayor the greatest mayor in America and the third greatest mayor in the world. This is 2006 because of everything that he had done in the city. So the people of Harrisburg see this thing come out saying, we have the greatest mayor in America. 5 years later, the city goes into bankruptcy. People didn't want to look at what he was really doing. He was getting all of these accolades. He was someone that was this godlike figure. He was this politician that in a crowded room, he could talk to you and make you feel like he's having a one-on-one conversation. He was charming. He was charismatic. He was attractive. He was somebody that just had that God-given ability to control a room, to get people motivated, and to get to people to love him. And so nobody wanted to see what he was really doing. I know it's hard to imagine. And as an investigative reporter in that city, I had a really difficult time coming to grips with this. But it wasn't until I understood how much power this man actually had that I was able to start doing more investigative reporting on what he was doing and how he was shuffling around money and how he was taking out bonds to pay off bonds that he took out years prior. It wasn't until then that I started to realize, okay, this is a huge problem. This is a book that needs to be written so people understand what happened inside of this city. But yeah, I know that you can't, a lot of people, when I do these interviews, ask me that question. Why wasn't anybody looking at him? And there was just no reason to. Everybody loved him. Everybody trusted him. And like any other form of dictatorship, whether it be a country or whether it be a city, that form of government does not work. And Harrisburg is just the latest example of that.
All right, just briefly, has anything changed to prevent this from happening in another city?
Well, the state government of Pennsylvania held hearings like politicians like to do, and they paraded a bunch of people through the state legislature over a couple of days, but nothing's happened as a result of that. This mayor, after my book came out, has been charged by the Pennsylvania Attorney General. The point of my book is that Harrisburg was financially murdered, but apparently nobody killed it because no one had ever been held accountable. A few months after my book came out, he now faces 499 charges of corruption and theft and racketeering. So things are happening now, and he could possibly go to jail, which does send a message that, hey, we're not going to allow our politicians to do that. But more importantly, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania is also looking at Wall Street because much like in the housing crisis that we had, people were being loaned money they shouldn't have been loaned. In this instance, Harrisburg was being loaned money by Wall Street. It should never have been loaned. So the Attorney General is looking at Wall Street criminally for what they did to Harrisburg. And the governor of Pennsylvania is looking at Wall Street civilly for what it did to Harrisburg, saying, hey, we need to get some of this money back that was taken from our city and given to Wall Street. So you combine those two things. And if the Attorney General of Pennsylvania and the governor of Pennsylvania are looking at Wall Street in this way, this could have huge impacts throughout America because it could save more cities because instead of Wall Street just loaning and loaning and loaning money to our municipalities, it could finally say, hey, you know what? Maybe we shouldn't loan this money because if we do, we could be held responsible for it if the city goes bankrupt. And that is the big news that's coming out of Harrisburg right now that can affect America.
We will be following that. Yeah, thank you. Chris Papst, the author of the book Capital Murder, an investigative reporter's hunt for answers in a collapsing city. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
What a fascinating story. All right, coming up next, we're delighted to have back with us Liz Peek. She is a columnist for FoxNews.com and the Fiscal Times, talking about the presidential debate coming up next here on Focus Today.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Welcome back. Hey, what an honor for us to have back with us today Liz Peek. She is a columnist for FoxNews.com and the Fiscal Times, and always a great resource for us here at the Dove. Hi, Liz. Good to see you. Okay. Well, listen, the big debate.
Long debate.
You know, that's probably the first question. Was it too long?
I think it was too long, particularly if, like myself, and perhaps like you watched both debates, then it seemed like an eternity, right? But I thought the second debate did go on a little bit too long. It certainly covered a lot of turf. But at the end, I thought even the candidates began to flag a little bit. And who can blame them? I mean, 3 hours of intense scrutiny, standing on their feet, 20 inches away from each other. I don't think people realized how crowded that stage was. It was pretty intense.
About it. One other thing about the debate, the line of questioning, it just seems like it was designed to just pit one against the other. I was really disappointed.
I thought it was dreadful, and I was very happy that John Kasich called them out on it. You know, about a third of the way in, or I forget how far into the thing, he sort of said, hey, if I were watching this from home, I'd turn off my TV. And I thought he was totally right. Look, this was CNN's biggest night ever in their history. And I think they pumped it for all it was worth. They wanted a reality TV kind of experience, and that's what they gave viewers. And I thought it was actually very demeaning. I think if they had done that with the Democrat field, their traditional CNN watchers would have been really affronted, and I think people should have been.
Any surprises for you?
Well, there are always surprises in the way that things ebb and flow, and I think for me, one of the surprises was that Ben Carson seemed to shrink a little bit on this stage. I can't even put my finger on it, but his very kind of relaxed demeanor and sort of soft-spoken self, surrounded by all these alpha personalities, I thought it seemed a bit underwhelming. And I like him. I think he's a great guy, very nice man. But I didn't think that he kind of rose to the level here. I thought Chris Christie kind of made progress for himself. He has a long, long way to go before he is again a credible candidate. But he kind of edged his way into the conversation and came across as strong and resolute and not a bully, which, you know, is sort of his reputation. He did well. And of course, Fiorina really did extremely well. And again, impressed people with her resolve, her data. I mean, she was very factual, rattling off how many brigades we need, how many ships, et cetera. I don't think anyone else on that stage really had that available to them. But, you know, I could be wrong. I don't know.
She obviously did her homework and presented herself extremely well. With all due respect for Donald and his popularity and everything, substantively, I thought he was very weak. Well,
and I thought for the first time it hurt him. I mean, we haven't really seen any significant polling come out, but I think that the Daily Beast actually ran a piece the next day, which I wish I'd written. I wrote something for Fox about the debate, but they sort of said, you know, it's getting a little stale. And I think that was right. I mean, you only can listen to it. In the beginning, everyone was very pumped up and excited about all the insults and the politically incorrect language and so forth. But after a while, it sort of gets dull. And boy, was he outclassed by some of the other people around him. I thought Marco Rubio really handled the foreign policy questions very well, as he always does. Jeb looked better. I thought Jeb stood up to Trump better, although he still is not really a great on-his-feet candidate. But I agree with you. I thought Trump seemed kind of deflated.
That's a great term, outclassed. I like that. I'll remember that. The other thing about the debate was sad because of the way CNN handled it, trying to pit one candidate against the other. They just didn't cover the gamut of issues. We didn't hear anything about education. We didn't hear anything about the economy, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think that's going to show up somewhere and hurt them? Well,
I think the next debate is going to be focused on the economy. I think, and I might be wrong on this, I think this was meant to be sort of a foreign policy tilted conversation. They certainly left a lot of stones unturned. I totally agree with you. But I think all the talk about Putin and China and so forth was because that was supposed to be sort of the heart of this debate. And as I say, the economy comes next. But to your point, I'm ready to hear these guys talk about education, because to me, that is really one of the not only most important issues confronting our country, but also one that really bridges all voter groups, and particularly Hispanics. I think if the GOP wants to make inroads with Hispanic voters, they really need to talk about education. And guess what? Slamming Common Core is not an education policy. It's too thin. They need to talk about what they're going to do instead, to raise standards, to get these schools accountable, and in a realistic way. I'm a little tired, and in the first debate, this kind of surfaced. I'm a little tired of people sort of saying, well, I'm going to do this and that when it's completely unrealistic. Let's have some realistic talk about education, about veterans affairs, about what we really can do to solve some of the problems this country has. That's what people want, I think. I hope.
Well, I do too. You know, it was interesting. I thought Senator Marco Rubio made an excellent point, and yet I haven't heard much commentary since the debate about this point. He said on day one, the president has to be prepared to make decisions. Donald Trump's response to that is, well, when I get in, I'll put together a good team. Can we afford the gap?
Well, I think it's a good question. I mean, of course, every president has to assemble their cabinet and their advisors and so forth. At this point, the only person we know that's advising Donald Trump is Carl Icahn, which honestly, to me, is sort of like a non-starter. I don't really need to slam Carl Icahn, but he's not the person I would want in charge of any aspect of our financial well-being. So look, I think Trump is, people have said he's not a serious candidate. I think he takes himself very seriously, but a serious candidate digs in, comes up with policy, backs it up with facts and figures. He has not really taken that step yet. And the question, I think, is he going to? Are people really going to press him to do that? If not, shame on them, because, saying I'm going to be so good with the military, it's going to make your head spin, a direct quote, is really meaningless.
All right. We're going to start seeing some people drop out. They just can't afford to stay in this. Do you think that'll happen after, say, Iowa, Ohio, New Hampshire, or before?
I think it's going to happen before then. We saw Rick Perry exit the race because he basically ran out of money. I think the four candidates who showed up at the earlier debate, George Pataki, he's not going to make it to Iowa. Honestly, most people in New York, where I live, kind of think it's a foolish undertaking. It's time for him to get out. Bobby Jindal, I think he's got money issues. He's got, it is interesting, by the way, that some of these guys have decent super PAC funding, but they don't have campaign money. And that's what happened with Rick Perry. And it turns out, despite all the anguish and wailing on the left, there is a difference between what you can spend your super PAC money on and what you need to raise money for in your campaign. Your campaign staffers and ads, that's your money you've raised. And some of these guys are running low on that. Jindal, I think he should bow out. Lindsey Graham, bless his heart, I think he's totally right on a lot of the military problems we have, and the need to really confront ISIS and to become more actively engaged in Syria. But I don't think his message is going to sell. He is really dogmatic about sending troops into the Middle East, and I don't think most Americans, I think, are not ready to make that commitment yet. So I think he'll leave too.
Rand Paul and Scott Walker, they seem now to be fading fast.
Well, I thought Rand Paul actually was the weakest on that stage, and I think his moment has passed, right? I mean, Rand Paul raises some very important issues about privacy, security of your personal data, et cetera. But I think, and also he represents the libertarian view that it's sort of the non-aggression pact, if you will. We'll let them fight it out over there, and we'll take care of our home turf. Unfortunately, when ISIS is beheading Americans, when our troops and advisory units are being clobbered by contestants in the Middle East and so forth, when radical Islam is a serious and mounting problem, I don't think his message sells. And by the way, I've met Rand Paul. He's a nice fellow, but he has very little presence. He's not a great candidate. And I think in this forum where you have 11 sort of big time personalities up there, I think he really fades. And yeah, I think he won't make it. Scott Walker, completely different issue. I don't know what's happened with Scott Walker. Here's a guy who has, by his own account, and really has confronted these very aggressive teachers unions and other facets of organized labor, stood his ground, been really a strong leader in his state, and yet he really on the national stage hasn't made much impact, and on the debate stage kind of wilted under pressure. Anytime Chris Christie or Jeb Bush or or Fiorina was talking and was told their time was up, they finished what they were saying. Scott Walker shut down like a clam, and I just think it's kind of interesting, isn't it, that he doesn't have the fuerza to kind of bring it on. And I don't know why. He's probably the greatest mystery of this campaign so far.
Interesting. Well, Liz, I know you're busy. Thank you for your time. We value it greatly. Let's stay in touch. We've got a few more to go through. The next one will be the Democratic one. Can you imagine CNN doing a Democratic debate at the Reagan Library? What's wrong with this picture?
I think what's going to be interesting is how completely dull and dishwater the Democrat debates are going to be. There are not going to be many of them, but at this point, there's almost nobody to debate.
Interesting. Thank you, Liz. Have a great day. Okay.
Thank you so much.
You bet. Okay, we'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Well, welcome back. I wanted to take the remaining portion of today's Focus Today to let you know that next week is a very special time here at theDove. We have set next Wednesday and Thursday aside as our annual fall Share-A-Thon. And we really felt led of the Lord only to do 2 days. And if you remember, we did not even do a spring Share-A-Thon this year. The Lord's leading us to trust Him more in so many ways. And I tell you, it is a stretch for all of us, if you can imagine that. So we're only going to do 2 days coming up next Wednesday and Thursday, asking you for your prayerful consideration of supporting theDove. Well over 87% of theDove's revenue is made up from viewers and listeners just like you. Quite frankly, we wouldn't be on the air if it wasn't for you. It just wouldn't happen. And so your monthly support is so valuable and so deeply appreciated. We do consider it a partnership. And what's happening here at theDove is remarkable, and you are a big, big part of it. And so if you got the letter in the mail this past week or so, or perhaps even the email, there's a couple of things you can do. If you got the letter in the mail, in there's a little response card, and you can take a few moments, pray over that, fill out that card and send it back in. That helps us a lot. And to let us know how the Lord is leading you to support theDove. If it's easier for you and more convenient, you can go to the Dove website at thedove.us, and you can support us there. It is totally secure, and it's very simple to use. Now, one of the things that has come up that's really one of the biggest potential opportunities we've ever had so far, and that is to take the Dove TV channel into the Portland market. This is huge. However, it does come with some requirements and some conditions, and that is that we have to upgrade our television master control room to HD. Now, a lot of you helped us replace the computer when it melted down. We weren't counting on that. The main computer that runs all of the television, that's been replaced. It's installed. It's up and running. It's fully capable of doing everything we need to do. But the rest of the control room has to be upgraded to HD. And if we can do that, then we qualify to potentially take our television channel into the Portland market. Actually, it'll reach well over 1.2 million people. And so I think we got a picture there in the control room, what's happening. There's a wide shot for those of you watching on Dove TV right now. There's our control room guys. That's Josiah, that's Bill. And some of that equipment that's standing right there in front of Josiah, wave your hand again there, Josiah. Most of the stuff in front of him has to be upgraded to HD. What Josiah is doing is actually running the television side of the operation, and what Bill is doing is running the radio side of the operation. And it's a very unique thing. In fact, we may be the only station or network in the country running 3 hours a day simulcast on 2 television stations, on a cable network, on Roku, on the internet, and 4 radio stations and 6 translators all at the same time. It's a very coordinated effort, and it works extremely well. So we're asking you to pray about it. And join us next Wednesday and Thursday, the 23rd and the 24th. And most of all, and I mean this sincerely, pray for theDove. We've had a very challenging summer in so many ways, and yet technically over the last month and a half, we've had some real technical things that kind of melted down and got in trouble, and we had to go fix them, and it's been quite the challenge. I won't go into all the details of that. So the keep this network going is pretty extensive, and it's a big commitment. So we couldn't do it without your support. So pray about the letter, pray over it, see what the Lord would have you to do. We need to raise about $85,000 to make the HD conversion. And I won't go real technical with all of that because that's kind of boring, but what it does, it allows us to finish off the complete operation to be high definition. And by being able to do that, that will qualify us to expand the Dove television operation into other markets. And the one that's right now in front of us is Portland. In fact, the signal could be just south of Salem, all the way up through Portland and past Vancouver, taking in well over 1.2 million people. So pray about that. And the other thing I say, and I mean this sincerely, when you're supporting the Dove, do not take from your church. Your first financial obligation is to your church, and so make sure that that stays in place. And a lot of you, viewers and listeners, are involved in other ministries, and I really want to encourage you, you support them first. A lot of folks do it with Hearts with the Mission and the pregnancy centers and the Youth for Christ and Campus Life and Young Life, and and the list goes on and on and on. Well, Salvation Army, Gospel Mission. So if you're involved in one of those ministries, you stay faithful with your financial support there too. But if the Lord's leading you to be a part of what we're doing here at the Dove, pray about it, and you can call us anytime. And probably the simplest thing to do and the safest thing to do is just go online at thedove.us. You'll see the button there on the website, and says support the Dove. You can click on that, and that's totally safe and totally secure. But if you did get the card or the letter in the mail, if you could send the card in, that's probably the easiest way to handle things so that we know what you plan to do. And if the other thing about the card, if you are one of the team members that supports the Dove monthly, if you send that card back in, then we know that the Lord's leading you to stay with that. Sometimes people change it, they add to it, or they subtract from it. That's up to you. But we need to know that as well. So you just send the card in, and that would be the other way to communicate with us. But if you feel led to help us with this special project coming up, people asked me the other day, well, what's the timeline? Well, and that's a great question. Because when we got the opportunity, or was presented with the potential opportunity of going into Portland, and we looked at what has to be done technically to meet the requirements, on top of that, we found out from one of our equipment suppliers that we can buy really the best level of what they call a TriCaster switcher. We can buy the highest one they have for a $12,000 discount if we can place the order by the end of the month. And that is a huge, huge savings, and puts the Dove television production capabilities at the highest level possible. That, with the computer that we replaced this past year, the infrastructure here at the Dove is phenomenal. So pray about it, and let us know what the Lord's leading you to do. And pray for next Wednesday and Thursday. That's the 23rd and the 24th, the 2 days that have been set aside. Only 2 days. In fact, the first day, we're going to do it as a reminder-a-thon, so to speak, to remind you that the Dove is listener-supported and viewer-supported. And then the 24th, asking you to help us with the raising of the capital to make the conversion to HD. So again, thank you. Thank you so very much for what the Lord is leading you to do. And thank you for those of you, the many, many of you that month in and month out, your faithful support. Wow. It helps us stay on the air with all of the things that are going on. And we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for your faithful monthly support. So thank you so much. All right. And pray about sending the card back, or maybe just going online at thedove.us. And again, the 23rd and the 24th, next Wednesday and Thursday, pray for the Dove. Thanks, and have a great weekend.
Hi, I'm Jim and I work at the Dove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.